What's up? Hope everyone's evening's going good. So, the verse I want to use that's kind of been like a theme as Hebrews 2:1, which says, "Therefore we must give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest we drift away." I tend to think that most people don't just jump off the wagon when it comes to living spiritually. We don't just say, you know what, I'm done with you, God, and just go off. It's usually a process, a drift, or like erosion towards a stone or something like that. It's usually not something you notice until basically somebody tells you. So I guess I'll start from the beginning. I'm 25 years old. I was born to my dad, who was in the Marines at the time, and my mom in Irvine, California. So I grew up around loud jets and helicopters and wildfires, stuff like that. But I was raised in a Baptist home, and that meant black suit and tie, Sunday best, follow all the rules, go to Sunday school. And when I was a kid, I didn't really quite understand why I was going to church. I just memorized stuff so I can get candy and whatnot. Because if you had the best memory, you got the most candy, right? But when I was first growing up, we kind of went from like church to church, because usually our churches would split, or somebody would get in a fight, or somebody would start some kind of drama. People would start hating. And as I grew older and more intelligent and more objective, I was kind of wondering why this was seeming to be a trend. And then when we moved to Las Vegas in 1996 from California, I was enrolled in a Christian school, greatest of all schools, right? Straight out of homeschool, so I didn't really know anything. I didn't know what a G.I. Joe was. I didn't know what a Barbie doll was. I was pretty sheltered. So, what do kids do when they find something that don't know anything? They like to pick on them, right? So they'll like set you up for failure and whatnot. But I spent, I want to say, 4 years going to that Christian school, and it was a private school, so that meant that people who got kicked out of public schools can go to this school as long as their parents paid. So anyways, we'd all pretend to close our eyes and pray and stuff in the morning, and nobody would really do it. But that kind of really impacted me when I was growing up. Going to a church school like this, is I kind of wondered that these people are supposed to be Christians and they're supposed to be God's people, and why are they doing this? And then the 5th grade, I got jumped behind a portable by about 7 kids, and teachers were literally like 15 meters away, and nothing really happened about it. And when we came home, my parents talked to the principal and stuff, and then they basically kind of covered it up and didn't say anything. Nobody got punished. So after summer break, and when I went into middle school, I beat them all up. True Christian fashion. But I just really started becoming disillusioned at this age about like the whole Christian thing. I just thought it was a thing, or people pretending to be good and then being somebody completely different when nobody else was around. So after 7th grade, I dropped out of middle school, really. I tried to do homeschool for a while. That got too expensive, so I didn't go to school until I was 16. I started going to college. But even though I wasn't in school, I was still involved with my aunt's church, which is also a Baptist church, and it was a youth group and stuff. And it was kind of a nice breath of fresh air. We were all kind of real with each other. We were getting some of the word, but it was more of a hyped up experience, and let's have fun, go on all these hikes and all this. It was kind of like a community activity. And then with that church, we also left because my uncle had confronted the pastor on something, because he had been living in sin. And so the pastor pretended to receive it well, and then he basically told the elders and stuff my uncle was bad, and he knew all this stuff, and we basically got excommunicated from that church. So after that, me and my family were done. We just completely walked away from everything church. We never completely denied God, though. But when I started going to college at the age of 16, I took a mythology class. So, a lot of young people kind of get disillusioned in college, but interestingly enough, that was the opposite for me. When I was going through mythology and studying all the different creation stories, from the Greeks to the Sumerian account to even ancient religions down in Peru and South America, they all had one thing in common: giant flood. Where did I first hear about a giant flood? Genesis, a little Bible story with Noah's Ark and the happy lion that's drawn on all the Sunday book pictures. And that kind of really, I kind of got intellectually involved in thinking, and these are weird theories, but, logically it could only mean that there was a flood because everyone's talking about it, but there's probably either only one God or no God, because I highly doubt there's like 50 of them, otherwise they'd all be fighting. So like it kind of opened my heart back up to kind of be open back up to God. I became more of a creationist, not really a Christian again, but I stayed in college for about 2 years, and then I got my first real job at UPS. That also stands for United Package Smashers, or Underpaid Slaves, Unfair Production Standards. You know it. It's a manual labor job. I worked as a truck loader, and I was a full-time college student at the time. Then they started me off on the midnight shift, so I had no sleep for like the entire month of December. But funny thing is, when people find out you're good at something, what do they tend to do? Put more stuff on you, right? Hey, you're good at this. Here, can you do this too? So I'd go up to bat, continue to work, and then just get more and more. It got to the point where I was being overworked, and I just started garnering a lot of anger in my heart towards like my supervisors, because they didn't care about me or my coworkers. People were getting hurt, and just things were bad. And then from 18 on out, I just started developing like really bad anger. Like not towards like traffic or something, but just towards like people I viewed as incompetent, inferior. I kind of got this complex of being the 18-year-old superhero who's ready for the world. So that kind of started spilling over into home. Since we had all left the church, we had all kind of gone our separate ways. We lived with each other, but nobody really knew what each other did. And that's the cool thing about this, though, is with me and my sister, one of the things I wrote on this little piece of paper is that God has always kept us spiritually preserved. Like he's always kept a little root in there that hasn't quite died out. And growing up, me and my cousin were in a search and rescue cadet unit for the Air Force, and that still had a lot of strong morals there, and that kind of preserved us from really getting involved in some bad stuff. But when I was 18, like our family was just kind of there. We didn't really go places with each other. We didn't really talk to each other that much, but my dad started noticing that I was really angry and stuff like that. He's like, hey, you should go to church. I'm like, you don't even go to church. Why should I go to church? I'm like, these guys are fake. I'm just like creating every excuse. Like I literally kind of had a bad taste in my mouth for Christians. Christians were like literally the people who would hurt me the most. Anybody else have like a similar experience with people who are called Christians? Right? So there's a really bad wound there. My sister's still wounded from that. But that just kind of stuck in my mind for about the next year. And then I went to a Christmas dinner with the rest of my family. We're all kind of crazy and everyone's an alcoholic, but one of my childhood friends would always go, her name was Amanda, and I had a crush on her at the time. But I actually did know that she was still going to church, so I asked her, I'm like, hey, what church do you go to? And she goes, oh, I go to Mountain View Christian School Academy. I'm like, that's the same school I freaking went to when I was in 7th grade. And I really, I gut checked. I'm like, am I going to go back? And I just felt like I had to go, even though it's a place I kind of hated. I felt like that was a place I had to go. So I went, and everyone was still there, same teachers, a lot of the same families of the people. And I kind of just sat there and listened to, emotional worship songs and stuff like that, and maybe a verse, and then everything I say the verse says type of teaching. But it got me back into my Bible, which was huge. And that's where I started reading stuff, and I'm like, it says this, but people don't do it. And I just kind of sat there pondering, and then she switched churches, which happened to be Calvary Chapel in Green Valley, which is my what I consider my real church, home church from whenever. And I went there, and then they did verse-by-verse teaching and exposition and actually explained stuff like, yeah, here's what the Jews meant by this saying. I'm like, whoa. Like, it started getting me intellectually involved, and I'm like, this actually starts to make sense. So I started staying there, and I started learning more. And after I went, for a while, my mom actually followed. And then I stopped going to church again because some drama happened with my friend, and I just figured it was more of the same, so I stopped going, got back more involved with the work. But work was different, just by reading the Word and being challenged by people in the body. I had noticed that I had different feelings and different outlooks on things. When you realize that it's a lost world and that a lot of people don't really know any better, you really kind of take a different turn. It's like watching your children, you sometimes expect a lot from your children because you've already experienced stuff and you know that that's wrong, but they don't. They have to experience it too. So, cool place about being known as like the angry guy at work is when you change, people notice. It's like when you stop throwing stuff, people notice. Or when you're calm, or when you're helping people out, or you're being nice to your boss, which is really hard, people notice. So that kind of built up a workplace testimony there, and I continued to work at UPS for a couple of years. But yeah, UPS was UPS. I never really went to any youth groups and stuff because I really don't like people my own age, because they just don't like stuff I like. They're into like Xbox, and nothing wrong with Xbox, but they're too into Xbox. That's all they do. But my mom was actually, she kind of outpaced me spiritually, should I say. And she was saying I should go to this youth group at the church, at the Green Valley Church. That was a Calvary. And I said, no, it's going to be full of dweebs that are like 20. It's like, why should I go? She's like, oh, well, I met this lady at the women's conference, and she has a son named Zach, and he's just like you. He's involved in a similar thing. And so we went. And it actually turned out to be really good. The youth leader there actually challenged us to give certain things up, or to try certain things for a different day. And we just kind of started to grow spiritually. And that's when this whole program called Youth Call came out that my pastor had created. And a bunch of my friends, actually all my friends, went on it. And they went to, it's an acronym. It stands for Youth Out Using Their Hands for Christ in All Lands and Languages, or Youth Organized Under True and Honest Communism and Liberal Legislation, as we called it. But they went, and they went to Uganda, and then when I was still working at UPS, I got a call one day from my dad, and he said one of our local leaders in the youth group, Jose, he actually died on that trip. Contracted cerebral malaria, and that kind of rocked everybody because, it's Jose. He's the lovable guy that you never think was going to die, but he left such a powerful testimony that they continued on with the mission. They could have come home, but they didn't, because they believed so powerfully that he would have wanted them to continue on. That just kind of spoke out to us that Jose had his eyes on the eternal, not the physical. Anyways, after they had come back, Youth Call recruitment started around again, and then me and a bunch of my friends, we actually went together, and we went to Cambodia. This was in 2012. Except we didn't know we were going to Cambodia until about 2 weeks before we left. They didn't know. So it was like a really huge shot in the dark, because we all quit our jobs. We all had to raise X amount of money and commit for like a year. So when we all left that, we were forced to live with each other. And I don't know if you know, but you don't know somebody till you've lived with them. You get to see the good, bad, and the ugly. Mostly the ugly. But that was a really hard adjustment for all of us, because, when we go to church, we usually have our best faces on and everything's all good and everyone's happy and stuff like that. It's church. Which is good because we can build each other up, but people you think were certain ways or like super spiritual stuff, you see how they are when they're not super spiritual. it kind of changes your outlook. Drama happened. It's a bunch of young adults living together. Drama's going to happen. But we actually became very strong because of that as a team. And we started learning more about getting into the Bible, inductive Bible study. We started learning about deculturing the gospel, different things before we went out to Cambodia. So when we went to Cambodia in 2012, that's where a lot of us really changed, because once you leave the United States, you get to see how the rest of the world works. The other 60%, living off of $50 a month. You really see how good we have it and how God has blessed you. Anyways, we stayed there for about a year, and then we came back. And Youth Call is a pretty regimented program, which means we were all treated like we were 16 again, and all of us had actually lived on our own, so we didn't like that. So we always go, yeah, that was good, but we're not doing it again. So when we got back, I took my Youth Call shirt out and I actually shot it with a shotgun, just for fun. And then that same day, they called me and another friend of mine, Leela, back, and they're like, hey, we want you to be student leaders for the next Youth Call team. We're just like, we'll pray about it. We'll pray about it. Turns out God wanted us to go back. We did. And then that kind of solidified what the changes that had been made in the last year. Because a lot of times we'll hear something, we'll change a little bit, but it kind of dies out. So that's where we went back for 2013, 14, came back here. She ended up working at some casino in Las Vegas, and then I worked as a temp worker for a while, and then actually applied for the police department because I thought God was calling me to be a cop, right? So I actually applied for the police department when I was in Cambodia. And then as soon as I got back, I went right into testing for it. So anybody who's applied for a police department knows that you have to investigate yourself, dig up files, you have to find out when you sneezed when you were 5. You have to do all sorts of weird things. And it's really weird because as I was investigating it, I was actually looking back, at my own life, where things had gone. And how God has used what I thought was seemingly bad situations to steer me into a different direction. The moments where you say, why, God, why did you bar me from service when I was 18? Things like that. Things that you think you want, but God knows that's not good for you. Taking certain people out of your life, certain influences out of your life, certain habits, When you look back at them, you actually see them for what they are. But when you see them, you just see an obstacle. So I thought that was good. I was doing really well in the testing process. I ranked 50 out of 2,000 recruits. They ended up taking 30, so I didn't make it. So I didn't quite understand what that was all about, but at this point I was getting really good at trusting God, so I just trusted Him. A friend I knew from the auxiliary had a job for me, and I started working that. And then I felt like God was calling me to actually join the Army. So I walked in the recruiter's office with a big stack of papers, same ones I had from when I was trying out for the police department. I'm like, here's what you need. What else do you got? They're like, medical records. And then after that, God just opened up doors. The doctor that I've been searching for a year, found him. He gave me the record. God basically allowed me to join the Army in a month. So that was pretty cool. But I guess what I want to say about this whole thing is that there's a lot of things that I thought I wanted back in my life, okay? So when I was right before obstacles, so to speak, or thorns in my side, things that Satan was using to try to get me away from God, I was involved with this girl right when I was still getting back into church, and she was a diehard atheist, all right? And I thought that she was coming down to Arizona. I lived in Las Vegas. I was going to go visit her. I had all the money saved up and everything, and I was getting ready to go. And then, bam, my sister's dog gets sick. It cost $800 for the little vet operation. So, being the benevolent brother that I was, I gave her the money, but then I couldn't do my trip. Funny thing about that is I look back at that now, if I actually gone and I actually, gotten more involved with this girl, I wouldn't be here. I'd be in Wisconsin, or I'd be in some college or something else like that. If I had joined the Marines when I was 18 and still angry at the world and all that stuff, I wouldn't be here. If I had, what else was it? Oh, yeah, that's pretty much it. Things like that. Those things that we think we want aren't always good for us. And the funny thing about that is in Luke 9:62, as I frantically turn there. Let's see. Luke 9:62 says, "But Jesus said to him, 'No one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God.'" Right? And that sounds eerily a lot like Lot's wife, right? Turn back, turn into a pillar of salt. A lot of times when I look back, I always wonder about the has-beens or what could have been and what not. And I just see now it's like everything God puts in your path, everything God does, every situation you find yourself in does have a purpose. You might not always see it, but once you go past it and you look back, you see it for exactly what it is. Every one of us has a story. Every one of us has something similar to that. Everyone's been hurt by somebody, but you can always look back at it and see where God has moved you and shifted you and guided you, right? Going back to Hebrews 2:1, lest we drift away. Anybody who's been on a boat or anything dealing with a current or land navigation, you drift. You have to stop and reorient. Or sometimes God reorients you, does the reorientation for you. Right? But right now it's like, when I first joined the Army, I was in basic training, plenty of Christians, everyone goes to church to get out of the cleaning detail, On Sundays, I went to basic training. We had other Christians, and it was good. We were strong. And then when I went to combat medic training in Fort Sam Houston, the chaplain team there was great. Soldiers were getting saved. Airmen were getting saved. Sailors, corpsmen, they were all getting saved. And we all kind of stuck together. The active duty Army is a completely different story. I got put on a artillery unit, and those guys are pretty gruff, because they have to haul like 100-pound shells, load it up, and then pack everything up, move, and do it again. But in my unit, in my squad, I'm pretty much the only Christian. We've got one who says he is, doesn't exactly live up to it, but I can't get on him too hard because there's times I find myself not living up to it. Like right now, I'll be open with you as a body. I struggle with being bold with the truth. Like I know what I know, but I'm not exactly bold with it. And there's that drift we talk about. It's like the more you kind of associate yourself with the world and you don't associate yourself with other believers, you will find yourself drifting. You'll find a lot of the people will be like, "Oh, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't go to church." The Bible says, "Don't forsake the gathering of yourselves." It says that for a reason. Because I try to strike it out on my own, and so did my family, and we all drifted away. A lot of my friends that I went on that missions trip, they've all drifted away. The first team, they're all gone. They've all gone to universities. They've completely turned their back on the gospel, save for a handful that stayed with it. And it was never this jump off the wagon. It was always a slow drift. Something you see them say they would have never said 5 years ago. And it can happen to every single one of us, no matter how strong you are spiritually standing. If you don't maintain that connection with God, you will drift. I'm a little more sensitive to drift now because that's kind of like the theme of this testimony, but I still find myself drifting. Mostly because, one, I don't make time to read God's word because I'm busy getting up at the butt crack of dawn to go do push-ups and then go clean vehicles and do all this stuff, and by the time you're done, you're tired and you want to do what you want to do. But that's not an excuse because I can always make time to read the Bible. I can always get up earlier to read the Bible. I just don't want to because I'm tired. So that said, now it's like, now I want to make more time so I can stay strong, because it's a tough work environment. I find myself drifting more than I'd like. Whereas in basic and IT, it was easy. Now it's hard. So for anybody here who's in a workplace where it's not easy to live out your faith, I would just say be careful of drift, be aware of it, and really find somebody in the body who you know is going to help you with it and be accountable with you and keep track of you. For some reason, you know, God's always watching and stuff, but sometimes we don't think he's watching. You know, we tend to forget he's there, out of sight, out of mind, right? When somebody else is watching, it kind of brings out a whole little different spiel, doesn't it? When somebody else knows what you do or what you're going to do, what you have a tendency to do, it brings out a whole different game. So anyways, I took all the time, so yeah, that's what I say. That's kind of the condensed version, but long story short, don't look back at what could have been. If you drive and you look at the rear view mirror for about 10 seconds on the I-5, you're going to crash into something. So it's like, you can glance back, see what's behind you, but don't look too far back. Keep your eyes ahead.